Reinventing your life. The comedian Henny Youngman tells about the time he was thrown out of an antique shop. All he did, I said, was walk in and ask, "What's new?" A mature woman was reflecting on her life. She said, "When I was a single girl, I said I would not marry a man who was bald, wore glasses, or had false teeth. I didn't, but now he is, does, and has." How life can change for us. In his well-known book, The Road Less Travelled, Dr. M. Scott Peck writes these words: "Recently, we have been hearing of a midlife crisis. What makes crises of these transition periods in the life cycle is that successfully working our way through them, we must give up cherished notions and old ways of doing and looking at things. Many people are either unwilling or unable to suffer the pain of giving up the outgrown which needs to be forsaken. Thus, they fail to experience the joyful sense of rebirth that accompanies the successful transition into greater maturity." There are countless stories, of course, and examples of people who have become dissatisfied with their own lives and the direction in which their lives were heading, and they've wanted to change. Caroline Jones, the well-known ABC presenter for many years, in the introduction to her book, The Search for Meaning, spoke about her experience of loneliness and depression, the tragic death of her mother and how it affected her, and that eventually in Easter 1985 led her to being received into the Catholic faith. She said these words: "It felt like coming home. After many years in a wilderness of excitement, of worldly achievement, but of spiritual loneliness." And you may even recall the story of Malcolm Muggeridge, British broadcaster and editor at one time of the magazine Punch, who denounced his belief in atheism and became also a member of the Catholic faith towards the end of his life. These are all stories, of course, of personal transformation. A number of years ago, because of my interest in the history of Christianity in Japan, I wrote a thesis on a Japanese samurai, Uchimura Kanzo. He was born in Edo in 1861, and his father was a strict Confucian scholar. Uchimura's education was based upon Confucian ethics: loyalty to feudal lords, fidelity and respect for his parents and teachers. At 16 years of age, he entered the Sapporo Agricultural College, where he became under the influence of William Clark, who was a keen Christian and president of the Massachusetts Agricultural College, and he'd come to Japan during 1876-77 to establish this new agricultural college in Sapporo. To become a Christian during this period of Japanese history was to test Uchimura's allegiances, as he wanted to honour his country and worship his nation's gods. And to become a Christian meant that he had to renounce and change all of that. He wanted to start a Christian ministry that was free from all the denominational hassles of the Western Church. And in 1901, published his own magazine, Shiisho no Kenkyu, or Biblical Studies. It went through 350 issues until 1930. And Uchimura travelled the length and breadth of Japan until his death, hiring halls and sometimes preaching to 600 to 800 people on Sunday afternoons in a village hall. He started the Muggeridge movement, which was called the non-church movement in Japan. And even though some Western Christians thought he was outside the boundary of Orthodox Christianity, He established a distinctive Japanese Christianity, summed up by the words on his tombstone, "I for Japan, Japan for the world for Christ, and all for God." Uchimura reinvented his life. As we consider the theme of today's address, Reinventing Your Life, let me pose some questions for you. You don't have to answer them. Are you repeatedly drawn into relationships with people who are cold to you? Do you sometimes feel that even the people closest to you do not care or understand enough about you? Do you feel that you, at your core, are somehow defective? That no one who truly knows you could possibly love and accept the person that you are? Do you put the needs of others above your own so that your needs never get met, and so you do not even know what your real needs are? Do you fear that something bad will happen to you, so that even a mild cold or sore throat sets off a dread of a more dire disease? And do you find that regardless of how much public acclaim or social approval you receive, you still feel unhappy, unfulfilled, or undeserving? As I've articulated those questions, some of you may have thought, that sounds like me. Rest assured, I won't ask you to put your hand up. But in 1993, two psychologists, Jeffrey Young and Janet Klosko, developed a therapy based on cognitive behavioural therapy, which was called schema therapy. These schemas, they believed, were patterns indicated by these questions, which they called life traps. They concluded that there are 11 common life traps, and that a life trap starts in childhood and reverberates throughout our adult life. It begins with something that was done to us by our families or other children. We may have been abandoned, criticised, overprotected, abused, excluded, deprived. We were damaged in some way, and eventually the life trap becomes part of who we are. Life traps determine how we think, feel, and act and relate to others. They can trigger strong feelings and emotions such as anger, sadness, and anxiety. And even when we appear to have everything in life, social status, an ideal marriage or partner, the respect of people who are close to us, we are often unable to enjoy life or believe in our accomplishments. A life trap damages our sense of self, our health, our relationships with others, our work, our happiness, our moods. It touches every aspect of our lives. A life trap struggles hard for survival. We feel a strong push to maintain that pattern of thinking and behaviour. This is because we want consistency in our lives, and the life trap is what we know. Life traps have three central features that allow us to recognise them. They are lifelong patterns, and they are self-destructive, and they struggle for survival. The life traps are identified as abandonment, mistrust and abuse, dependence, vulnerability, emotional deprivation, social exclusion, defectiveness, failure, and subjugation, unrelenting standards, and entitlement. We don't have time to explore all of those today, of course, but let me ground two of those for you, and I hope you'll excuse a personal reference, because I'm not up here to tell people what to think and believe, but I want to ground these life traps for you with a personal experience. The abandonment life trap is the feeling that people you love will leave you and you'll end up emotionally isolated forever. I was born in England during World War II, and my father was away for 6 years in the Royal Air Force. I cannot remember ever seeing him until I was 5 years of age. And in 1948, my mother was suffering from clinical depression as a result of my brother Paul being born with a deformity in his feet. And she was admitted to a mental hospital in the south of England for 9 months. I only saw her once during that time. And therefore, is it any wonder then that from that childhood experience of losing a significant person in my life, that I carried a life trap of abandonment into my adult life? I was always afraid of people leaving me. And now I love a person, of course, my wife, Catherine, who is leaving me through death rather than staying with me. Breaking that life trap is a story of therapy and professional support. And the other life trap that I've become aware in my adult life is subjugation, which has been heightened since my wife Catherine has had brain cancer. With subjugation, we sacrifice our own needs and desires for the sake of pleasing others or meeting their needs. We allow others to control us. We either do this out of guilt or we hurt other people by putting ourselves first, or fear that we will be punished or abandoned if we disobey. As a child, we were probably subjugated by a parent or family member. And as an adult, we repeatedly entered into relationships with dominant, controlling people or with needy people who were too emotionally damaged to give anything back to us. And all of this, of course, has the overlay of the Christian faith, where we are encouraged to put others' needs before our own. My wonderful mother always said to me since she became a Christian in her 40s, "You always have to think of others, Peter, before yourself." Not a good basis upon which to build caring for yourself mentally and physically. How many ministers do you know where subjugation is their life trap? The way in which we change a life trap then is first to become aware of it, to identify it and its impact in our lives, and then to continually chip away at it, bit by bit, gradually weakening its pull on us. In today's gospel reading, we have the story of Zacchaeus, a less than honourable cheat, who was called runt behind his back. Nevertheless, he was a man of wealth and had a certain position in society, a bit like a mafia boss. But people invited him to their homes because he was a celebrity and rich. And this man, this tax cheat, gets the urge to reinvent his life by climbing up a tree because he wanted to see Jesus passing by. And this is what some people have called the Zacchaeus Moment in their lives. Professor Marcus Borg, who many of you would have read his books, in his book, The Heart of Christianity, talks about the role of thin places in our lives where we experience the transforming encounters with God. And perhaps we all need a moment like this in our own lives, the moment that says that sometime in our lives, at some point, we too have to respond to the urge, to the desire, to the impulse to reinvent our lives. And through the intervention of Jesus, Zacchaeus was able to reinvent his life. Christians, of course, talk about following the way. And it's common in Judaism, where the way involves a new heart, a new self-surrender to God. One of the meanings of the word Islam is surrender, to surrender one's life to God. And at the heart of the Buddhist path is letting go of all the desires and the sufferings that we have had in the past. And it's the same internal journey as dying to an old way of being and being born into a new way. And according to the foundational text for both Taoism and Zen Buddhism, the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu said, "If you want to become full, let yourself be empty. If you want to be reborn, let yourself die." And so the process of personal spiritual transformation is central to all of the world's religions, and of course particularly to the Christian faith, where in John 3 we see that interaction with Jesus and Nicodemus, where Jesus says to Nicodemus, "You have to be born again." So in the old Trastevere section of Rome stands a small nondescript church. It was built in 1630, hardly visited by tourists, as it contains no great works of art. It was once the chapel of the Carmelite sisters, and it was abandoned by them in 1971. But within its ageing walls, new life is coming to birth. Today, this unlikely edifice in Rome is the headquarters of a lay association called the Community of San Egidio, a harbinger of the rebirth of a faith founded on actually following Jesus rather than assenting to statements about him. They have over 50,000 members in 70 countries. They have commenced soup kitchens, homeless shelters, working with people with AIDS in Africa, and in recent years have participated vigorously in dialogues with people of the Muslim faith. New life has been birthed in an old building. So even churches and congregations like this can experience newness of life. And thus, for all of us, we need to be born again. And even though I know our fundamentalist friends talk about that phrase all the time, it is an integral part of what the Christian faith is all about: personal transformation and renegotiating our life and finding newness of life. It is the way to recover our true selves, the path to beginning to live our lives from the inside out rather than from the outside in. To be born again involves dying to the false self, to the masks that we wear every day, to that identity, to that way of being, and to be born into identity centred in the divine spirit. Many years ago, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Dag Hammarskjöld, wrote in his book Markings these words: "I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was put. I don't even remember answering it. But at some moment I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour I was certain that existence is meaningful and that therefore my life in self-surrender had a goal." May today, as we leave this place, may we not only reinvent our lives and think about our lives, but also be encouraged by the divine spirit to centre ourselves in the life of God. And our blessing. Blessed are you, God of growth and discovery. Yours is the inspiration that has altered and changed our lives. Yours is the power that has brought us to new dangers and opportunities. Set us, your new creation, to walk through this new world, watching and learning, loving and trusting, following in your footsteps for the sake of the kingdom. Amen.